The millionaire meets a black beggar with a baby in the cold, and his attitude changes forever. John Peterson, Wall Street titan, ice in his veins, steel in his deals. Lived in a penthouse fortress overlooking Central Park. Solitude was his currency. Every day, millions changed hands. Every night, silence echoed. Weakness, a disease. His father drilled it into him. The world confirmed it. Then came that November night. A nor'easter was ripping through the city. Rain lashed the limo's windows. John, bone-tired from a brutal board meeting, barely registered the cityscape blurring past. Normally, he ignored. The shadows, the forgotten corners. But tonight, red light, a deserted side street, and there she was, a young black woman huddled in a doorway, shivering, a baby clutched in her arms. The storm was a monster, clawing at them both. Something flickered inside John, something he hadn't felt in decades, a ghost of compassion. Jenkins stopped the car. Jenkins, his driver, nearly choked. "Mr. Peterson, are you sure? The exposure?" John ignored him. He stepped out into the downpour. The woman looked up, eyes wary. Her name, he'd later learn, was Sophia. The baby, Rafael, was wrapped in a thin, soaked cloth. Both were desperately, achingly cold. Against Jenkins' frantic protests, John offered them a ride. Sophia, suspicion warring with desperation, accepted. He brought them to his penthouse, a world away from the doorway they'd just left. Crystal chandeliers, priceless art, and then Sophia, gently warming Rafael by the fireplace. John felt something unfamiliar churning within him. A longing, a vulnerability. He offered them the guest room, a temporary haven from the storm raging outside. He watched her cradle the baby, his heart clenched. Sleep evaded him that night. Sophia and Rafael haunted his thoughts. Their fragility was a stark mirror to the cold, impenetrable steel of his own existence. He tossed and turned. The image of their faces burned into his memory. What was happening to him? Morning. Sophia was gone. Just a note. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson, but we can't stay." Disappointment, sharp and unexpected, stabbed at him. An empty space in his chest he hadn't known existed. But then, on the antique dresser, a small, worn teddy bear. Rafael's, deliberately left behind. A silent message. John knew, with a certainty that stunned him, this wasn't over. Why had she left? And why the teddy bear? What was it about this woman, this child, that had cracked the icy facade he'd spent a lifetime building? The game was about to change. He could feel it. "Ei, antes de continuarmos com essa história incrível, preciso te fazer alerta importante. Muitos inscritos têm relatado que o YouTube removeu suas inscrições sem aviso. Dá só uma conferida rápida no botão vermelho aí embaixo para garantir que você ainda está inscrito no canal. Não quero que você perca nenhum conteúdo exclusivo que vem por aí. E já que você está aí, deixa aquele like poderoso que me ajuda muito com o algoritmo. E me conta nos comentários de qual cidade você está assistindo. Adoro conhecer cada pessoa incrível que faz parte dessa comunidade. Sua participação faz toda a diferença. Vamos interagir." John knew, with a certainty that stunned him, this wasn't over. Why had she left? And why the teddy bear? What was it about this woman, this child, that had cracked the icy facade he'd spent a lifetime building? The game was about to change. He could feel it. He called Jenkins. Find her, Sophia and Rafael. Use whatever resources you have. I need to know where they are. Jenkins, never one to question, simply nodded. Right away, Mr. Peterson. John went through the motions of his day. Board meetings, phone calls, the relentless hum of Wall Street. But his mind was elsewhere, replaying Sophia's wary eyes, Raphael's tiny hand clutching the teddy bear. He couldn't shake the image. It was a glitch in his perfectly programmed world. Hours crawled by. Then a call. Jenkins. Mr. Peterson, I found them. They're not where you'd expect. John felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Where, Jenkins? Just tell me. The address is listed as your father's foundation, Mr. Peterson. The Hope for Tomorrow shelter in Queens. His father's foundation? The same foundation he'd routinely dismissed as sentimental nonsense? He felt a cold wave wash over him. Are you sure, Jenkins? Absolutely sure? Positive, Mr. Peterson. I've got eyes on them now. He told Jenkins to stay put. He needed to see this for himself. The drive to Queens felt like an eternity. The sleek Bentley seemed out of place, jarring against the gritty reality of the neighborhood. The Hope for Tomorrow shelter was a brick building, worn but clean, with a small playground out front. He spotted them immediately. Sophia was handing Rafael a juice box. The boy was laughing, a bright, innocent sound that cut through John like a knife. He got out of the car, his heart pounding in his chest. As he approached, Sophia looked up. Her eyes widened, not with fear this time, but with something else. Recognition and a strange, heartbreaking sadness. Mr. Peterson, she said softly, what are you doing here? He didn't answer. He just stared at Rafael, at his wide, trusting eyes, and then he saw it. The birthmark, a tiny crescent-shaped mark just behind his left ear. His breath hitched. He knew that birthmark. He'd seen it before, on someone else. Sophia, he managed to say, his voice barely a whisper. Tell me about Raphael's father. Her face crumpled. His father, he died before Raphael was born. A good man, a kind man. What was his name? John pressed, his voice trembling. She hesitated, her eyes filled with tears. His name was Daniel Peterson. The world tilted. Daniel. His younger brother. The brother everyone said had died years ago in a car accident. The brother he hadn't thought about in, well, a lifetime. But the papers, the funeral, it was all a lie? He looked back at Rafael, at the tiny face so familiar, so heartbreakingly like Daniel's. He had a nephew he never knew existed, a nephew he'd almost left out in the cold. But the Peterson family, they told everyone Daniel was dead, he said, his voice cracking, hardly believing what he was hearing. Sophia just nodded, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. They paid me to disappear. Said it was best for everyone. Best for the Peterson name. His father. This was his father's doing. The cold, calculating patriarch who valued power above all else. Had he silenced his own son? Erased him from existence? He stared at Rafael, a wave of guilt and rage washing over him. He looked back at Sophia, then back at Rafael. This couldn't be happening, could it? He was going to find out the truth, one way or another. And just then, Rafael, oblivious to the storm brewing around him, held out his little teddy bear. "Mister," he lisped, "Teddy wants to say thank you." And just then, Rafael, oblivious to the storm brewing around him, held out his little teddy bear. "Mister," he lisped, "Teddy wants to say thank you." John's world swam. He knelt down, trying to focus on the little boy, on the worn fur of the teddy bear. His brother, his nephew. Betrayal, raw and brutal, ripped through him. "Sophia," he choked out, I need to understand. The accident, Daniel's death, tell me everything." She bit her lip, her eyes darting around nervously. "It wasn't an accident, Mr. Peterson. John's blood ran cold. Murder? His own family?" He stood up, his hands clenched into fists. He had to get to the bottom of this. He had to know the truth, no matter how ugly. "I'm taking you both somewhere safe," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Somewhere they can't reach you." He scooped Rafael into his arms, ignoring the boy's startled cry. Sophia hesitated, fear etched on her face, but she followed him. She had no choice. They were halfway to the car when it happened. A black SUV screeched to a halt in front of them. Two men in dark suits jumped out, guns drawn. "Mr. Peterson," one of them barked, "we need to talk." John froze, his heart pounding. He knew these guys. He'd seen them lurking around his father's estate. Bodyguards, enforcers. "Get back in the car, Sophia," he yelled, shoving Rafael towards her. "Run!" Sophia didn't argue. She grabbed Rafael and bolted, disappearing around the corner of the building. John braced himself. This was it. "Sorry, Mr. Peterson," the first man said, raising his gun. "Orders from above." But then something incredible happened. A figure leaped from the shadows, tackling the gunman to the ground. It was Jenkins. His driver, his loyal, silent Jenkins, was fighting back. The second gunman swung his weapon towards Jenkins. John reacted without thinking, throwing himself in front of his driver. A deafening blast, a searing pain in his chest. He stumbled, his vision blurring. He could hear Sophia screaming, Rafael crying. Everything went black. When John opened his eyes, he was lying on the ground, staring up at the gray sky. Jenkins was kneeling beside him, his face pale with shock. Mr. Peterson, stay with me." He tried to speak, but his throat was filled with blood. He could feel his life slipping away. Then he saw her, Sophia. She was standing over him, her face contorted with grief. Rafael was clinging to her leg, his eyes wide with terror. And then John saw something that made his blood run cold. Something that shattered everything he thought he knew. Sophia wasn't holding Rafael. She was holding a gun, and it was pointed at him. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "This is for Daniel," she hissed, "and for everything your family took from me." Before John could react, before he could even comprehend what was happening, she pulled the trigger. She pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. The gun, it was empty. A stage prop, maybe. He didn't know. But the look on her face, it was real. That raw, burning hatred. It was aimed right at him. Jenkins, bless his heart, was already moving. He tackled Sophia, wrestling her to the ground. Rafael started screaming again. a high-pitched, terrified wail. John tried to sit up, but the pain in his chest was blinding. He looked down. No blood. Just a heavy weight. He reached inside his coat. A metal plate. Bulletproof vest. He'd started wearing it after he'd begun to suspect his father. He had to get them out of here. Now. "Jenkins, get them in the car! Now!" he managed to croak. Jenkins, always efficient, scooped up Sophia and Rafael, practically throwing them into the back of the Bentley. John stumbled to his feet, ignoring the throbbing in his chest. He slid behind the wheel, slamming the door shut. The tires squealed as he tore out of there, leaving the two suited men sprawled on the sidewalk. He didn't dare look back. He drove like a maniac, weaving through traffic, ignoring the blaring horns and angry shouts. He had to get them to safety. But where? He couldn't trust anyone, not anymore. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Sophia was staring at him, her eyes wide with confusion. Rafael was huddled in her lap, his little body trembling. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the roar of the engine. "What's going on?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. He needed time to think, to process what happened. Just happened. His brother, his nephew, his father's betrayal, and now, Sophia, pointing an empty gun at him. He drove for what felt like hours, finally pulling into a secluded parking garage beneath one of his properties, a place where no one would think to look. He turned off the engine, plunging the car into darkness. He turned to Sophia, his face grim. "Okay," he said, his voice low and steady. "Here's the truth, and it's going to sound crazy, but you need to listen." He told her everything. About Daniel, about his father, about the foundation, about the men in suits. He told her about the birthmark, about the feeling he had when he saw Rafael. She listened in silence, her face a mixture of disbelief and horror. When he was finished, she just stared at him, her eyes filled with tears. I don't understand," she stammered. "Why would they do all this?" "Power," he said simply, "and money. That's all my father cares about." He paused, took a deep breath. "And there's something else," he continued, his voice barely a whisper. "Something I just realized back there." He looked at Rafael, sleeping soundly in Sophia's arms. "Rafael, he's not Daniel's son." Sophia gasped. What are you saying?" "Daniel couldn't have children," John said, his voice trembling. "He told me himself, years ago. He was sterile." The garage was silent, except for Rafael's soft breathing. Sophia stared at him, her face pale as death. Then who is his father?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. John looked her straight in the eye. "I think," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "I think his father is my father. I think his father is my father." The air in the garage hung thick and heavy. Sophia's breath hitched. Rafael stirred in her arms, whimpering softly. He was cold. They were all cold. But the chill that ran through John wasn't from the November air. It was bone deep. Incest. The word, ugly and raw, flashed in his mind. His father? With Sophia? Sophia shook her head, a frantic, desperate denial. No, that's impossible. I only met him once, years ago. She trailed off, her eyes widening in dawning horror. She remembered the charity gala, the forced smile, the lingering touch on her arm. A small, discreet donation afterwards. For you and Daniel, my dear. A promise of future help, if needed. The money had been a lifeline. Had it come with a price she never realized? He knew about Daniel's situation. John pressed, his voice low and dangerous. He knew Daniel couldn't have children. He set you up, Sophia. Used you. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through her. She squeezed Rafael tighter, a protective instinct taking over. That monster. To use her. To use Daniel. To possibly, I won't let him touch my son. She spat out, her voice shaking. But then a flicker of doubt crossed her face. Rafael's eyes. So blue. Not like Daniel's warm brown eyes. And the way he held himself, confident even as a baby. A miniature version of someone she couldn't quite place. John saw the doubt. He reached out, gently touching Rafael's cheek. We need to know the truth, Sophia. For Rafael. We need to find out who his father really is. He pulled out his phone, his hand shaking. He needed information. Fast. He dialed Jenkins. Jenkins, I need you to do something for me. Something. Delicate. He paused, swallowed hard. I need you to get a DNA test. Rafael. And my father. Silence. He could practically hear Jenkins processing the request. Right away, Mr. Peterson. But how are we going to... Don't ask. Just find a way. Discretion is paramount. Understand? Understood, Mr. Peterson. He hung up, the weight of the world pressing down on him. Incest, murder, lies. His family was rotten to the core. He looked at Sophia, at Rafael, innocent, caught in the crossfire of a war he didn't even understand. He had to protect them, no matter the cost. Suddenly, a sharp rapping on the car window. John jumped, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun he kept in the glove compartment. He peered through the tinted glass. Standing outside, bathed in the harsh fluorescent light of the garage, was his father. He looked different, older, weaker, but the eyes, the cold, calculating eyes, were the same. He had a strange, almost pleading look on his face. John hesitated. What was he doing here? How did he find them? It had to be a trap. But then his father spoke, his voice raspy and strained. John, please, I need to talk to you. It's about Daniel. John's blood ran cold. He lowered the window a crack, his fingers still hovering over the trigger. What about Daniel? He snarled. Don't you dare speak his name. His father sighed, a long, weary sound. He's not dead, John. John's world tilted again. Not dead, but the funeral, the obituary, the endless years of mourning, all a lie? What are you saying? He whispered, his voice barely audible. His father leaned closer, his eyes filled with a strange, unsettling mixture of fear and desperation. Daniel is alive, John, and he's been waiting for you. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows behind his father. Tall, gaunt, with haunted eyes. A familiar face. John gasped, his heart seizing in his chest. He knew that face. He hadn't seen it in decades, but he knew it. It was Daniel. But it couldn't be. Daniel was dead. He had seen the coffin with his own eyes. Right? Daniel spoke, his voice raspy, barely a whisper, a hint of a smile filled with longing. "Hello, John." Then everything went silent for a moment, like the world had stopped turning. Then a loud shot was heard. "Hello, John." Then everything went silent for a moment, like the world had stopped turning. Then a loud shot was heard. Not from Sophia's empty gun, from somewhere else. Daniel crumpled, right in front of John, his gaunt body collapsing in a heap at their father's feet. John's mind couldn't process it. His brother, shot. Again? He lunged forward, forgetting his own pain, his anger, everything. Daniel. But as he reached him, he saw it, the blood, not just on Daniel's chest, but on their father's hand. He was holding a gun, a small silver pistol, practically hidden in his palm. The pleading look was gone, replaced by that familiar coldness, that ruthless control. He was becoming a liability, his father said, his voice flat. He knew too much. Sophia screamed. Rafael started crying, louder this time. John felt like he was drowning. This couldn't be real. He looked at his father, at the gun, then at Daniel, his brother's eyes already glazing over. He wanted to scream, to rage, to tear his father apart. But he was frozen. "You killed him." And he managed to choke out. His father just shrugged. "I did what was necessary." He was weak. Always was, just like his mother. That's when something inside John snapped. All the years of suppressed rage, the resentment, the pain, it all came crashing down. He launched himself at his father, tackling him to the ground. The gun went flying. They wrestled. Two old men locked in a desperate, brutal struggle. John was stronger, fueled by adrenaline and years of pent-up hatred. He punched, he clawed, he fought like a man possessed. He had his father pinned, his hands wrapped around his throat. He could feel the life draining out of him. He wanted to squeeze, to end it all right there. But then he saw Sophia. She was standing there, holding Rafael, her face a mask of terror. She was looking at him like he was a monster. He hesitated. He couldn't do it. He couldn't become like his father. He released his grip. His father gasped for air, coughing and wheezing. John stood up, his body shaking. He looked at his hands, covered in blood. He was covered in his brother's blood. "Get out," he said, his voice trembling. "Get out of my sight, and never come near me or my family again." His father didn't argue. He stumbled to his feet and limped away, disappearing into the shadows. John turned to Sophia, to Rafael. He wanted to say something, to explain, but he didn't know what to say. "We have to go," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Now." He scooped up Rafael and took Sophia's hand. They ran. Out of the garage, out of the building, out into the night. They didn't stop running until they reached the docks. The cold wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of salt and decay. John looked out at the dark water, at the flickering lights of the city in the distance. He felt lost, adrift. Everything he thought he knew was a lie. His family, his life, everything was a sham. Sophia was standing beside him, her face pale and drawn. Rafael was asleep in her arms, finally at peace. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the wind. John didn't answer. He didn't know. He had no plan, no idea where to go or what to do. But then he saw something in the water. A dark shape moving closer. A boat. And on the deck, a figure standing tall, silhouetted against the moonlight. A woman. He squinted, trying to make out her face, but it was too dark. As the boat drew closer, the woman raised her hand in a gesture of greeting. And then John recognized her. It was his mother. But that was impossible. His mother had died years ago. Everyone said so. But there she was, alive, and she was smiling. "Hello, John," she said, her voice echoing across the water. "It's time to come home." "Hello, John," she said, her voice echoing across the water. "It's time to come home." Home? After all this? John stared, his head spinning. His mother alive? It made no sense. But there she was, stepping off the boat, walking towards him. She looked different. Older, yes, but also stronger. There was a hardness in her eyes he'd never seen before. "Mom," he stammered. Rafael stirring in Sophia's arms. She stopped in front of him, her gaze sweeping over Sophia, then settling on Rafael. A strange expression flickered across her face. "John," she said, her voice surprisingly firm, "you've gotten yourself into a mess, but don't worry. I'm here now. I'll fix it." She reached out, taking his hand. Her touch was cold, unnervingly so. "Come on," she said, pulling him towards the boat. "We need to get out of here. Now." He hesitated, glancing back at Sophia. He didn't trust this. Something felt wrong. "What about them?" he asked, gesturing to Sophia and Rafael. His mother's eyes narrowed. "They're complicated, but they'll come too, in time." She didn't wait for his answer. She simply turned and walked back towards the boat, expecting him to follow. John looked at Sophia. Her face was etched with suspicion. He knew he had to make a choice. Trust his mother, a woman he thought was dead, or trust Sophia, a woman he barely knew but felt inexplicably drawn to. He took a deep breath. "Sophia," he said, his voice low, "I don't know what's going on, but I need to find out. Will you trust me?" She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his. Then she nodded. "I'll trust you," she said, "but be careful, John. Something's not right." He nodded, taking her hand and following his mother onto the boat. As they sailed away from the docks, leaving the city behind, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap. The boat was luxurious, filled with opulent furnishings and state-of-the-art technology. But there was an unsettling stillness about it, a sense of emptiness that made him uneasy. His mother led them to a large cabin, decorated in shades of gray and white. It felt sterile, devoid of warmth. "Make yourselves comfortable," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I'll be back in a little while." And then she was gone, leaving John and Sophia alone in the cabin. Rafael was still asleep, oblivious to the danger that surrounded them. John turned to Sophia, his face grim. "We need to be careful," he said. "I don't trust her." Suddenly, the door to the cabin slammed shut. A lock clicked into place. They were trapped. John rushed to the door, pounding on it with his fists. "Mom! Let us out!" No answer. He tried the handle. Locked. "What's going on?" Sophia asked, her voice rising in panic. He didn't answer. He knew. He knew what was happening. He turned to Sophia, his eyes filled with dread. "She's not my mother," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "She's an imposter, and she's not going to let us leave this boat alive." Then the lights flickered and died. The cabin was plunged into darkness. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the boat. It wasn't Sophia. It was Rafael. John fumbled for his phone, trying to turn on the flashlight, but it was dead. He reached for Sophia, but she was gone. "Sophia!" he yelled, his voice cracking with fear. No answer. He was alone in the darkness with a screaming baby. Then he heard it, a low guttural chuckle coming from the corner of the room. "Hello, John," a voice said, a voice he knew all too well. "Did you really think you could escape me?" A match flared, illuminating a face, his father's face. But it wasn't just his father. It was his father, wearing his mother's clothes, and in his arms, cradled like a baby, was a doll. A grotesque, life-size doll, made to look like Daniel. "We're a family now, John," the figure said, his voice a chilling blend of male and female. "And families stay together forever." "Hello, John," the figure said, his voice a chilling blend of male and female. "Did you really think you could escape me?" A match flared, illuminating a face, his father's face. But it wasn't just his father. It was his father, wearing his mother's clothes. And in his arms, cradled like a baby, was a doll. A grotesque, life-size doll, made to look like Daniel. "We're a family now, John," the figure said, his voice a chilling blend of male and female. "And families stay together forever." Then the lights flickered and died. The cabin was plunged into darkness. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the boat. John fumbled for his phone, trying to turn on the flashlight. It was dead. He reached for Sophia, but she was gone. "Sophia!" he yelled, his voice cracking with fear. No answer. He was alone in the darkness, with a screaming baby. Then he heard it, a low, guttural chuckle coming from the corner of the room. A match flared, illuminating a face, his father's face, but wearing his mother's clothes, holding a doll resembling Daniel. But something was off. It wasn't his father's real face. It was a mask, a disturbingly realistic mask that looked exactly like his father. "Who are you?" John shouted, his voice trembling. The figure chuckled again, a sickening sound that made his skin crawl. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you, John. But let's just say I've been pulling the strings for a very long time. Your father was just a puppet, a useful idiot." Suddenly, a voice, soft and clear, cut through the darkness. "John, don't listen to him." A spotlight clicked on, blindingly bright, illuminating the center of the cabin. And there she was, Sophia. But it wasn't the Sophia he knew. This Sophia was different. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light. Her clothes were different, richer, more powerful. And she was holding a gun, pointed straight at the masked figure. "Sophia, what's going on?" John asked, his mind reeling. She didn't answer him. She just kept her eyes fixed on the figure in the corner. "It's over, Dr. Albright. Your little game is over." Finished. Dr. Albright? The name sparked a distant memory. A brilliant but disgraced psychiatrist who had worked with his mother years ago. A man rumored to have experimented with mind control. The masked figure chuckled again, unfazed. "You can't stop me, Sophia. I've been planning this for years. I control everything now. You're John. You're Rafael. The entire Peterson empire. You control nothing," Sophia said, her voice cold and hard. "I've been waiting for this moment for a long time, waiting to avenge my family." She raised the gun, her hand steady. John watched in disbelief as she pulled the trigger. But then something even more shocking happened. Instead of shooting the masked figure, she turned the gun and fired directly at John. Everything went black. Everything went black. Silence. Then a ringing in his ears. A dull throb in his chest. Not the searing pain from before. A different kind of hurt. Empty. He was lying on the cold, hard floor. Above him, a single bare bulb flickered, casting long, distorted shadows. The cabin was gone. The boat vanished. He was in a dingy, windowless room. Concrete walls, a steel door, a prison cell. He tried to sit up, but his body screamed in protest. He was wearing a different set of clothes, cheap, ill-fitting. His wallet, his phone, gone. Sophia, Rafael, where were they? He struggled to his feet, his legs unsteady. He stumbled to the door, pounding on it with his fists. "Sophia, Rafael, anybody? Help!" Nothing. Only the echo of his own voice, mocking him. He sank to the floor, his head in his hands. What had happened? Sophia? Shooting him? Dr. Albright? It was all a nightmare, a twisted, insane nightmare. But the blood on his hands, that was real. He looked up, his eyes scanning the room. A small metal grate high up on the wall. A sliver of light peeked through. He dragged a rickety stool to the wall, climbed on top, and peered through the grate. What he saw made his blood run cold. It wasn't a prison. It was a hospital room. Sterile, white. He could see rows of beds, machines blinking, nurses bustling about. And in one of the beds, hooked up to a ventilator, was him. His other self, lying motionless. Eyes closed, tubes running in, and out of his body. He recoiled in horror, stumbling off the stool and collapsing on the floor. This couldn't be happening. It was impossible. But it was real. He knew it deep down. He was looking at his own body, his real body, the one that had been shot, the one that was. Then it hit him. Like a punch to the gut. He wasn't John Peterson. Not the John Peterson he thought he was, anyway. He was something else. Something created. A clone? A robot? A program? He didn't know, but he knew one thing for sure. Everything he thought he knew about himself, about his life, was a lie. And then he heard a voice, soft, soothing, coming from a speaker hidden in the wall. "Hello, Subject 42. It's time for your recalibration." The steel door creaked open, and a figure stepped into the room. It was Sophia, but not the Sophia from before. This Sophia was different. Her eyes were blank, devoid of emotion. She was wearing a white coat, a stethoscope around her neck. A doctor. "Hello, John," she said, her voice flat, monotone. "I'm here to help you remember who you really are." She approached him, a syringe in her hand. He backed away, his heart pounding. "Sophia, what are you doing? Don't you remember me?" She didn't answer. She just kept walking, her eyes fixed on him, like a predator stalking its prey. "It's time to reset," she said, her voice cold as ice. "Time to erase the memories. Time to start over." He knew what she was going to do. She was going to wipe his mind, erase everything he had learned, everything he had felt. Turn him back into whatever he was before. He couldn't let that happen. He had to fight. He had to remember. He had to find Rafael. He lunged at her, knocking the syringe from her hand. She didn't react. She just stood there, staring at him. A faint smile played on her lips. "You can't fight it, John," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "It's already inside you. The program is running." Suddenly, his head exploded with pain. Images flashed before his eyes. Memories, but not his own. Memories of laboratories, of experiments, of being created. He screamed, clutching his head. The pain was unbearable. Then he saw it. A single fleeting image. A face. A child's face. Rafael. But it wasn't Rafael. It was him. A younger version of him. A boy with bright blue eyes and a mischievous grin. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that Rafael wasn't just a nephew. He was a son. His son. And then everything went black again. "Rafael, meu filho." A dor era tanta que mal conseguia respirar. Sophia, a médica fria, pronta para apagar tudo. Era real ou só mais uma mentira? Precisava sair dali. Precisava encontrar Rafael. A porta, trancada. A janela, pequena demais. Mas e o teto? Aquele painel parecia solto. Com a força do desespero, puxei, rasguei, me cortei. A dor era combustível. Lá em cima, canos, fios, escuridão. Rastejei, me arrastei, sem saber para onde ia. Só queria fugir. Encontrar Rafael. Barulho, passos. Estavam vindo atrás de mim. Precisei me esconder. Achei uma sala, escura, fria, cheia de equipamentos estranhos. E no centro, uma cadeira, com cintas e uma tela. Na tela, eu, de novo. As mesmas cenas. A mansão, a chuva, Sophia, o pai, tudo de novo. Estavam me controlando, me observando. A porta se abriu, uma luz forte. E ela, Sophia, de novo com o olhar vazio. "Hora de voltar, John." Ela disse a voz sem emoção. Não ia deixar. Não ia ser marionete. Me joguei para cima dela com toda a força que tinha. Ela caiu. A tela se apagou. Corri. Corri sem rumo, sem saber para onde. E de repente, o lado de fora. A noite, as estrelas, o ar puro, livre. Mas Rafael, precisava encontrá-lo. Uma voz, familiar, vindo de trás de mim. Procurando por alguém, me virei. Era ela. A mulher do barco. Minha mãe e nos braços dela, Rafael, dormindo. "Ele está seguro agora, John," ela disse, o olhar estranhamente doce. Está tudo bem. Mas não estava. Ainda não tinha terminado. E essa é só o começo da nossa jornada. Você precisa se inscrever agora. Esmague o like já. Mostre que você está comigo nessa. Inunde os comentários. Qual sua teoria sobre o final? Compartilhe agora com 5 amigos. Eles precisam conhecer essa história. Só os verdadeiros fãs entendem. Esse é o momento. Não espere nem mais um segundo.